Let me just tell you, how many volunteers do you have now? 600, is it? More than that? We haven't interviewed 600 people, you know. How many nurses have worked here? How many family members have had people who have been treated here? Thousands, right? We interviewed 25 people. That was 15 more than we should have done. And I'm really concerned that when people see the film, why didn't they interview so-and-so? Oh God, she would have been, you know. And I mean, this is my, you know, that's why I've said this is a history, not the history, but I hope it kind of captures the spirit of it. Just the depth of love for the place from people, the depth of pride that the people who work here, the nurses and so on, feel for working here, the devotion to them wanting this to be a different kind of experience. And I think the other thing that I hadn't understood until I did the film is the whole Willen at home thing. You know, the reach of the hospice to people who might never ever come here, yet the philosophy is going out so that people have a good death at home with their family, and that is facilitated by the Willen at home team. I think, yeah, remarkable, really. And the vision. I mean, I haven't been here. I'm sure there probably aren't dogs and cats wandering around in quite the same way that there were before, but I get the feeling that kind of homely thing, even though there's a lot more 160 people paid to be here now, somehow that has permeated. That's the impression that I get from listening to people. I haven't been here to experience it for myself, but that's the impression I get, that it's still got that kind of, this is not like an institution. This is more like your home, really, and that we're going to make it as friendly and relaxed as we possibly can. You know, that is an amazing thing to keep going for 40 years, isn't it? It really is. There's one bit I had to cut out again at the very end, was when Princess Di came here. Jane Henshaw tells the story about how Les Gell got a phone call from Buckingham Palace and he thought it was a wind-up, right? So he put the phone down and they rang back again. There were things like that. I mean, there are other things. I'm trying to think of other amusing things, but there are amusing stories and there are sad stories and everything. Yeah, well, not sad. They're they're uplifting stories. They make you sort of choke up a bit because they are, yeah, just so nice. The Living Archives motto is everybody has a story to tell. The good thing is this film is whatever it is now, 58 minutes, whatever it is, creeping under the hour. But all of those interviews will be there in the archive. I think for people who see it, who've had no connection, I'm hoping this anyway, will be very moved by the whole experience and think, God, this is some organisation. What an amazing thing. People often think of hospices as very sad places. I think that's, you know, people are frightened and so on. But the overriding impression that I get from, you know, everyone who's been connected with it is, well, of course there are sad moments, but essentially that this is a very upbeat place. That, you know, there's a lot of fear and everything around it, but people don't come here to be made even more gloomy. And I think that, you know, I get the impression that the staff go out of their way to be positive. And I mean, it sounds crazy, doesn't it, really, when you're thinking about it? But now I've seen so many people talking about it, to make it fun as well. As someone said to her, I've come here to die. She said, no, you haven't. You've come here to live positively in your last days. And yeah, as I say, I found that comes from everyone, from the people who were here when their loved ones were in here. The attitude of the staff and the care and the atmosphere they provide. It's amazing how people do it. Goodness only knows. But as Steve Barnes, the person who was the chaplain here for many years, says, he said, there are times when you're very down. He said, but you are actually seeing the very best of people, and that is, very uplifting. And I think, that certainly comes across. What I want people to take away is, I hope that they get a feeling of just what an incredible organisation this is, what an incredible bit of work that has been done over the last 40 years, a piece of work that has been maintained. I mean, I've been talking to people about this. I said, name me a charity where people only speak positively about it. I suppose the Royal National Lifeboat Institution and Willen Hospice, I'd say, but that's the thing. People love it so much. So many people have been touched by this in their darkest hours, and yet they come out of it saying, this is a wonderful place. This is where my partner, my friend died, but it's an amazing place, and we're going to go and raise money to make sure other people have the same experience. It is from the original vision that those two women had through to, it's just been, if you like, the torch has been carried. And Jane Henshaw was one of the original, not the original, but very early on the Council of Management, talked about when it first opened, they wanted a place that was kind of domestic and homely. And I've included a bit about the cat and the dog and other, it was that was about it. It was not like a hospital. And then the nurses talk about having worked in the hospital, coming here, and it's about what the patients want. So it isn't everyone's got to be bathed by 9 o'clock. It's a completely different regime. And many people mention the difference. They're not critical of hospitals because hospitals have a different job. This is not their speciality. This is Willen's speciality. And I think the other thing has been the fact that, over the 40 years, I think because of Willen, attitudes in things like the local hospitals and everything else has changed towards treating people at end of life, but they can't, it's a lot improved, but they can't do it the way that Willen has done. And I hope that that's what comes across in the film. It's interesting that in the Leslie Gell interview that I did when I was there's a live interview I did with him some time ago now, but obviously we got around to talking about the hospice, and he and Marjorie started to look at different buildings, and none of them were kind of satisfactory, and then they heard about this farm coming up for sale, and they came and had a look at it, and I'm not even sure that the lake was built, but they said, look at that. Look at what they're going to look at. This is the place. And what a choice, really. And when you've got, and then I included in the film the photographs of the state of the place. I mean, to have, again, that's a vision. I mean, all they had was this house in a pretty crappy state, looking out to what was going to be this lake, and thinking, yeah, this is what we need. And it hasn't moved, has it? With all that's happened over the last 4 days, oh no, we've got to go and get a better site. No, you've got it, mate. You have got the perfect site for this. This is a place where it's about caring for people, but not just the person who has got cancer or whatever other life-threatening illness it is, but the whole family. And doing it in a way that is relaxed and actually at times humorous. I mean, people have talked about a lot of laughter around the place. It isn't a grim and dour place. And and that's reflected in the people that we interviewed who had friends or family in here being cared for in their last days, and it inspired them to fundraise, to give back in some kind of way, because they are so impressed with it. And I think I've included right at the very end someone saying, this is Milton Keynes' favourite charity, and there is a reason for it. Well, I don't honestly think that it can improve. The interesting thing is that both Peter and Paul Davis say in their interviews that one of the things they're hoping is that that we are now a very, very diverse city ethnically, and the impression is given, and I don't know whether this is true or not, that people in different ethnic communities have not, if you like, come and seen Willen as a natural place that can help them in their hour need. But on the other hand, many faith groups are have been huge supporters of the place. I mean, that would be the only difference. In other ways, I think, how could it improve on what it's doing? I think the philosophy, I mean, will there be ever another Willen Hospice or branch of? Because from what I gather, you're not going to increase the number of beds here, and yet this city is going to double in size, yet you are expanding the Willen at Home side of things. So maybe within the next 40 years there'll be not it's not like McDonald's, but it would be testing whether it would be possible to say, okay, we're going to open another branch of this, as it were, or whether you just need to have other people inspired. Those two women, this was, they came, I mean, it just, when you think back on it, there were very, very few hospices in this country. I think there were one, two or three. I think they went to one in Sheffield, because in the archive there's some pictures from obviously a visit to a hospice. Very, very few. And for them to say, this city needs this, and for them to, if you like, know enough about, of their own personal experience about people dying, but to say the hospice is the answer in those very early days, that was incredibly visionary.